Transport investment is very important for the urban economies. We've done a lot of transport investment, for example, at Birmingham New Street, which is pulling in investment from places like John Lewis. There are big transport schemes all over the country which are really generating a lot of jobs and also GDP for our local cities.
Cities only function well, only work properly, if we're able to bring large numbers of people in and out in an efficient way. That means you have to invest in the transport system, and it means that you've got to stop all our modes of transport being grossly overcrowded, which will prevent people from accessing all the facilities that are available in a city.
It's quite clear that it's not possible to build enough roads to cater for car use in cities. So we have to provide good alternatives, and public transport is the best way of doing this. It's got to be a mainstream way of making cities develop in the future.
By reducing congestion, we really will see some big benefits in terms of our urban economies as well. And public transport, of course, has a big role to play in making sure that we can actually get people out of their cars using public transport and thereby reducing congestion.
Our first priority is to make sure that cities have got access to a sizable labour market. And you just can't do that on the back of the car. So cities that are far too car dependent have a very low finite number of people that they can actually bring in on the back of the car, because the car is such an inefficient user of road space. If we can actually get people onto bus, metro, light rail, then all these modes of transport, much more efficient use of road space, you increase the size of the labour market, and cities are allowed to grow.
Transport has got to be a key part of carbon reduction strategies, particularly in cities. If we have the right transport policies linked to the right land use policies, we can reduce carbon in cities by making them less car-based and putting public transport as well as cycling and walking at the heart of the way people get around cities.
Modal shift is one of the biggest things that we're looking at the moment as far as the city regions are concerned, and we're doing a lot of work with sustainable travel organisations to get people out of their cars and using public transport. And it's one of the biggest things really, because if we can get people out of their cars, that of course reduces carbon, reduces pollution as well, and reduces congestion, so we actually end up with a triple win.
The problem public transport's facing is the cars are getting cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. And in 20 years' time, we're going to be facing, public transport's going to face competition from a car industry, which is not going to be the dirty polluter that it is today. And that's why in 20 years' time, we have to ensure that the public transport industry continues to hold its edge when it comes to moving people in a greener way. And that means a level of investment, especially in the bus fleet, which we're not seeing at present.
If people are going to be able to get out of poverty, they need access to work, to education, to training, as well as to other facilities that will help them. They need good transport for that, and because many people in lower income groups don't have access to cars, public transport is absolutely critical for this. I think this case isn't widely understood. There's a tendency to see, for instance, bus funding as something that's something for transport people to worry about, but actually if there aren't affordable and convenient and high quality bus services, a lot of people won't have the access to the jobs, the training and the education that they need to get them out of poverty.
A lot of the jobless people around who don't have cars need public transport to access to those jobs, and in fact employers need access to those skilled people too. So we can get people to jobs, and also we can get employers access to the skilled workforce they need.
Social inclusion is going to come back in a big way, because we're going to see a level of cuts to local services, especially bus services, which is going to disadvantage so many people. So it'll come back, and we're going to have to focus on that again. And public transport is just so critical, because people on the bottom third of the income scale, the vast majority of them don't have access to a car. Public transport's their lifeline.
If you look at the funding that's going into transport, London has been a huge winner. It's been able to make the case solidly for the investment, for the wider benefits that transport investment brings to London. I don't think it's a case of saying let's take money from London and give it to the other cities. Instead, we need to up the investment in the other cities so that they get transport systems that London is now getting.
There is a big disparity. We're not saying that that's wrong for London to have that size of funding settlement, but we do think that in the city regions we must have more if in fact the government is going to use city regions as the power base to actually generate further GDP increase. I think this is a great website actually for people to have a look at, especially businesses and chambers of commerce, institute directors, people like that really, because I think what we're doing now is getting our message right away across to organisations to actually identify the importance of transport in the sort of 4 or 5 areas we've just talked about.
Well, transport is the glue that holds cities together, and I think the evidence for that needs to be spelt out, because certainly the cities outside London haven't done well in relation to transport investment over the last 15 to 20 years, and I think the evidence needs to be set out in a clear and consistent way that can be accessed by lots of different groups.
I've looked at the Transport Works website and it's great. What it does is provide a robust evidence base, and now that the Northern Way's been wound up, I do think that pteg core cities websites like Transport Works can fill that vacuum, because the way we win this debate in transport, yes, we can continue to argue the case why the rest of the country needs more investment compared to London, but our key challenge is to increase the UK spend on transport so that we're no longer the European laggards when it comes to how much we spend on transport. To do that, we have to produce compelling evidence base, especially to Treasury, as to why transport's critical for future economic prosperity.